Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. College football once again returned in style with an amazing Week 1. And yes, we do know we have one last Week 1 matchup later tonight between Clemson and Duke, but with the majority of the games already complete, we had to sit down and recap, like we do every week, recap the madness that was Week 1, from the fantastic matchups, the shocking upsets, and the major storylines that are not just going to shape up this week, but shape the rest of this college football season. We wanted to take that time to share some of our biggest moments from the opening weekend of college football. So once again, guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're so glad that you could join us today. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. Of course, check out everything down in the description below from our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com, our Patreon account for exclusive college football content year-round, and of course, our mailing address to send us some gear for our background. Obviously, we're at the old Gridiron HQ. Today, we'll be back at our original setup, or our new setup here in just a few days, so stay tuned for that, but send us some gear to be represented in that background in every single video. Let's go ahead and dive into, again, what was really a fantastic opening weekend of the season. And I want to start with the collective here. Just the biggest storyline I'm looking at right now is what a rough day it was for the Big 12. TCU, Baylor, West Virginia, Texas Tech, all going down with the rest of the Big 12, sure, taking care of business, but mostly in against inferior opponents. The biggest storyline, arguably, from Week 1 came in the Big 12, and it came down at TCU, where the Colorado Buffaloes upset the national runner-up from last year and the 17th-ranked TCU Horned Frogs. The Buffaloes winning 45-42 in Deion Sanders' debut with Colorado. It's the prime effect. It is the prime effect. And it's just one of those things, guys, where, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't see it coming. I was not high on Colorado. Did not think they were going to be very competitive in Week 1 against TCU. Thought TCU would do very well against them. And right from the start, you knew this was a Colorado team that wasn't going to roll over and struggle. Despite 53 new players coming in, over 80 transfers, this was not going to be a Colorado team that was going to roll over and was expected to just rebuild. They were expected to contend immediately, and you saw that very early on in that game. It ended up being one of the better games of the entire weekend. Over 1,100 combined yards of offense between the Buffaloes and the Horned Frogs. Shedeur Sanders leading the way, though, for Colorado. 510 passing yards in his debut, not just with Colorado, but at the FBS level. 510 passing yards, 4 touchdowns for the Buffaloes. Travis Hunter, playing both ways at wide receiver and cornerback, was electric. 119 reception yards, made 3 tackles on defense, plus a crucial interception later on in the game, and Colorado escaped to get to 1-0. This is a Colorado team, guys, that, again, people don't want to believe could be good. We didn't believe they were going to be good, but now the tune's starting to change a little bit, and we realize, are they going to go win the Pac-12? Probably not. Teams like Oregon, USC, Washington, guys like that, Utah even, are still too good. But a Colorado team that maybe could flirt with a bowl game if the offense continues to play at this rate. And you go back and look at that game from Saturday. The offense was amazing. I'm not going to dog on that at all, but what was more impressive to me was the Colorado defense. Yes, we know they allowed 541 yards of offense in that game, but they stepped up when they needed to the most. Had an interception in the end zone. Later on, intercepted TCU at the 4-yard line. TCU knocked on the door, scored a touchdown, picked him off. Travis Hunter pulled off that one. TCU later on missed a field goal, which Colorado obviously held them to that field goal attempt. The Buffaloes defense stepped up and made the big plays when they had to, and that's ultimately what you have to do. That's what you have to do, at the end of the day. You can let 541 yards, but if you come through in the clutch and your offense is taking care of business, you're probably going to be okay, and that's what the Buffaloes did. 1-0, they have a shot to start 3-0 with a game coming up against Nebraska at home, the first game in Boulder under Deion Sanders, who already is having a major effect, not just with this program, but throughout all of college football. The next week they play Colorado State. A 3-0 start is not out of the question for the Buffaloes, and they have the nation on watch. TCU goes down 0-1 after finishing second in the nation last year, national runner-up in 2022. Still in the Big 12, we saw a massive upset with Baylor losing to Texas State. Many thought the Bears would be poised for a bounce-back year under Dave Aranda. They lose 42-31 to the Bobcats, giving Texas State their first ever victory over a Power 5 program. very good chance Baylor could start 0-2 as the Bears host Utah in Waco next weekend. We'll touch more on that game later on this week, but not an ideal start for a Bears team that was in desperate need of a bounce-back season. Same can be said for Texas Tech. The Red Raiders, many had them pegged as a Big 12 dark horse, thought they could make the Big 12 championship game, would be poised for a big year under Joey McGuire. After an 8-win season in 2022, they go on the road and lose to Wyoming 35-33 in double overtime. They outgained the Cowboys 431 yards to 320 yards, outgained them by 111 yards. They led 17-0 after the end of the first quarter, but did not score any points until 41 seconds remaining, and that was to tie the game and send it to overtime. Red Raiders missed 3 field goals in that game, so kind of just continue to shoot themselves in the foot. They just make a few of those, or even just one of those, they most likely win a narrow game in the regulation. Yet they fell in overtime to the Cowboys, who could be a threat in the Mountain West. And Texas Tech, like Baylor, could find themselves starting 0-2 after beginning the season with very high expectations. Texas Tech hosting Oregon in week 2. We were hoping that would be one of those big top 25 matchups to begin the year. Certainly will not be the case now, and the Red Raiders in very big danger of completely just wiping away any high preseason expectations this team had, maybe already have, with that loss to Wyoming. Sticking in the Big 12, finally, Penn State taking down West Virginia 38-15. No one really expected West Virginia to hang with Penn State in this game. The Nittany Lions, the 7th-ranked team in the country, are a legitimate college football playoff contender, but it was amazing what Penn State was able to do, right? Drew Aller, that era beginning at quarterback now, 325 yards and 3 touchdowns as the starter for Penn State. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen combining for over 120 rushing yards and a touchdown. Penn State's defense looked phenomenal, and this Nittany Lions team will once again be one of the better teams in the Big Ten and have the shot to make the college football playoff, while West Virginia turned in an unfortunate, disappointing performance. Strong start, relatively, fell apart in the final 3 quarters. They dropped this game to a Nittany Lions team that, again, is elite, while Neil Brown and his squad is continuing to looking for answers in what could be his final year in Morgantown. Moving outside of that, let's go back to Thursday night for a second. That's kind of the big storyline I want to take away. What was the biggest takeaway for me was the struggles in the Big 12, namely that big Colorado win. That was the big one. But you go back to Thursday where Utah dominated Florida 24-11. The Utes, without Cam Rising, still managed to score on the first play of the game, a 70-yard bomb by Bryson Barnes, the not 1, not 2, but 3rd-string quarterback. Yes, the Utes only had 270 yards of offense, but the defense was phenomenal. Shutting down Florida, rarely giving them an opportunity to get into scoring position. Held the Gators to just 13 rushing yards on the day. Had 5 sacks on Graham Mertz. Florida did not look good, guys. They made a lot of kind of boneheaded mistakes, a bunch of penalties in the worst opportune times. Utah looked really, really good despite their star quarterback being out. They look that good now with Bryson Barnes at quarterback. Imagine how good they can be when Cam Rising finally returns from his injury, whether that is this week against Baylor or later on as we get closer to Pac-12 play. But regardless, the Utes looking good, looking like a team that could very well win their 3rd straight Pac-12 championship. Take a look at the quarterback battles. That was obviously a major area of concern for a lot of the country. A lot of these 2 teams here in Ohio State and Alabama. How is Ohio State going to look with Kyle McCord at quarterback? The answer? Not that great. The Buckeyes did get the win over Indiana, 23-3, but it was not the offensive explosion that people were hoping for. McCord just throwing for 239 yards and an interception. Ohio State only led the Hoosiers 10-3 at halftime. It was not, if you're Ohio State, you were pleased with your defense, although Indiana is going to be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, but your offense definitely didn't give you that warm feeling, that really high energy feeling that we were kind of hoping to get. Ohio State, fortunately for them, does have time to figure it out. Youngstown State this week, and then, of course, Western Kentucky the week after before they enter Big Ten Conference play, before they play Notre Dame and then get into Big Ten Conference play. They have time to figure things out. Alabama, on the other hand, does not have time to figure things out. They play Texas in week 2, but they might not have a quarterback controversy anymore. Jalen Milroe was named the starter, and he looks phenomenal against Middle Tennessee as Alabama beat the Blue Raiders 56-7, scoring 14 points in each of the 4 quarters. Milroe throwing for over 190 yards, 3 touchdowns, also rushing for 2 touchdowns. Tyler Buckner and Ty Simpson also adding a rushing touchdown of their own later on in the 4th quarter. But Milroe looked good. He was accurate. He was electric. He's the type of guy that Nick Saban wants running this offense, and I do not think there was a quarterback battle anymore in Tuscaloosa. Milroe will get the start next week against Texas, and he should be the starter from here on out. So when it comes to those quarterback battles, Alabama looked to be in better shape than Ohio State as we head a little bit further on into this season. Later on Saturday night, North Carolina, South Carolina, arguably the biggest, most hyped game on Saturday in Charlotte, really didn't live up to the hype. It was good for about a half, and then North Carolina pulled away, beating the Gamecocks 31-17. The biggest takeaway from me, the improvement of North Carolina's defense. Give credit to the Tar Heels and what they were able to do against South Carolina. Yes, they allowed over 350 passing yards. I understand that. But the UNC defense held South Carolina to -2 rushing yards and, like Colorado, made the stops when it mattered the most. They allowed yards here and there. They allowed chunk plays here and there, but they stepped up when they had to. South Carolina had multiple trips into the red zone, and UNC stepped up big time. They held the Gamecocks to a field goal from the North Carolina 8-yard line. They forced a turnover on downs at the UNC 25, although South Carolina originally had the ball at the UNC 13-yard line. Forced another turnover on downs at the UNC 22, even though they had the ball at the UNC 11. Drake May, 269 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. But UNC is looking to be in very good shape. They have one of the better quarterbacks in the country. The defense took a major step forward. A big double-digit victory over South Carolina. This was a great start for Mac Brown's squad. This is a team that is people are talking about Clemson and Florida State as the top dogs in the ACC. North Carolina should be involved in that conversation as well. No doubt about it. Speaking of Florida State as one of the top dogs in the ACC, that's how we'll conclude today's recap, because that's how we concluded Sunday night. The biggest game of Week 1 by far was number 5 LSU taking on number 8 Florida State in Orlando, and it was a game that we were hoping would be close, would be just as thrilling as last year's matchup in New Orleans. And for the longest time, it looked like that was the game we were going to get. LSU leading 17-14 at halftime, both teams making a handful of mistakes, as expected from just about every team in the country in the first game of the season. But then in the second half, it was all Noles. It was all Seminole. 17-14 trailing at halftime. Florida State scored 31 straight points in the second half to seal the deal, winning 45-24. And for me, ultimately ending LSU's chances of making the college football playoff for a bunch of different reasons. LSU still has a very brutal schedule ahead of them. The entire SEC West slate, including a road game at Alabama. And even if the Tigers were able to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, they would have to make sure they don't slip up anywhere else in the regular season, and then most likely would have to get past Georgia in the SEC championship game. One more loss between now and the end of the year, and LSU is out of playoff contention because they're not getting in as a 2-loss team. No one is, unfortunately, until the playoff expands. Florida State did that. And also the committee's going to look at this and go, LSU lost by 21 points. It wasn't even a close game. They dominated that entire second half. And again, like a couple of these teams we mentioned, the defense was the difference maker for Florida State. 2 great quarterbacks in Jordan Travis and Jaden Daniels. Jordan Travis outplayed Jaden Daniels in my eyes. And you look at the defense from the Seminoles. First drive of the game, LSU marches down to the 1-yard line. Looked like it could be a long day for Florida State. 4 straight plays, Florida State got the stop. Stuffed LSU time and time again and prevented a touchdown on that opening drive. And that set the tone for the rest of the night. Stuffed them at the 1-yard line on the opening drive. Later stopped LSU on downs at the Florida State 13-yard line. Then they forced an interception off of Jaden Daniels that later led to a Florida State touchdown. Florida State's defense had 4 sacks on the day, 5 tackles for a loss. Held LSU's rushing game to just 113 yards on the day. It was a dominating second half by Florida State, a dominating defensive performance, if I should say. And this is a Florida State team that does look like a top 4 team in the country. And with this win, is possibly setting up for a colossal showdown in Death Valley 3 weeks from now when Florida State travels to take on Clemson. A potential playoff play-in game or a potential first of 2 meetings between the Tigers and the Seminoles. Going to be a top 10, maybe top 5 showdown in Death Valley between Florida State and Clemson. We could not be more excited, of course, assuming Clemson gets past Duke later on the night. But Florida State winning what was the game of the week, not because of what happened on the field, but because of the hype surrounding it. They kind of sucked the air out of that rather quickly. But a huge win for Mike Norvell and his squad. Seminoles will be a top 5 team when the new poll comes out later on Tuesday. And you can expect the same from us here when we release our official Gridiron Expert Top 25 poll on Tuesday afternoon as well. So there you have it, guys, our Week 1 recap. It was a great week. Colorado pulling off the biggest upset of the weekend by far. Florida State winning the biggest game of the week in dominating fashion. Didn't see too many close, thrilling games, but we had a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of statement victories, a lot of ripple effects. They're not just going to be rippling through week one, but are going to carry over from now all the way until the end of the season. Going to be a great year, guys. If this was any indication of what is to come throughout the rest of the season, we are in for a fantastic treat. We're in for a fantastic year. And of course, as always, we'll have you covered every step of the way right here at the Gridiron Expert. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. So much college football content coming your way from now all the way through the rest of the year. You do not want to miss out on it. Check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks, including our Patreon account, and our mailing address to send us some gear to put in our background once we return home. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.